Today we are going to talk about another measure of dispersion. This one is called the range, and we're also going to talk about another one called the interquartile range. Taken together, these two can tell you a lot about how far the data are dispersed or how much variation there is in the data. So let's start with the range. First of all, the range and interquartile range are appropriate with ordinal and numerical variables only. And the reason is because you are trying to line everything up in order and kind of finding the highest and lowest. And so you need to be able to line those up and have some sort of hierarchy in order to do the range or interquartile range. So in order to find the range, what you're going to do is you are going to use only the valid response categories, and you're going to subtract the lowest value from the highest value. So basically you're going to tell people what the range of values is. So let's go ahead and do an example. Here we have a distribution of ages, and so you can see here are our valid categories for the variable age, and to calculate the range we're going to take the highest, which is 24, and we are going to subtract the lowest, which is 18, and that's going to give us 6. So the range is 6 years. Another way that we could interpret this is we could say that ages ranged from 18 to 24 in our distribution or in our sample. So that would be how we would interpret that. So with numerical variables, it's pretty simple. You're just subtracting and kind of figuring out how many data points there are. So what do you do when you have an ordinal level variable? So for an ordinal level variable like this, you have the categories here of strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Well, we can't really subtract because we have category names rather than having numbers. And so our range here is going to be strongly agree to strongly disagree. So when we interpret this, we would say that the response is ranged from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And that would be our interpretation. So now we move to something called the interquartile range. And the interquartile range is concerned with quartiles. So basically when you divide the data up into fourths or into quarters, you create what are called quartiles. And when you do that, you're able to look at kind of where the middle 50% lie. And so the interquartile range tells us the range of values that encompass the middle 50% of responses. So the IQR, you divide up the data into fourths or quarters, and each quarter has the same number of cases. So quarter 1 is where the first 25% of cases fall. Quarter 2 is where the 50% of cases fall. Quarter 3 is 75%, and quarter 4 is 100%. Quarter 2 is also known as the median. It's where half of the data are above and half of the data are below. So how do we find those quarters and calculate the interquartile range? We're going to do this by looking at a frequency distribution. So here we have an example for age. So we have our categories going down the side, and then we have our frequencies, and we've got our percents, cumulative frequency, and then cumulative percent. So we're going to figure out our Q1, Q2, Q3 the same way as we would do the median. So remember when we were calculating the median, we were looking down the cumulative percent column and finding the first case to go above 50%, and that would be our median. We're going to do the same thing with quarters. So for Q1, we're going to look down the cumulative percent column until we get to the first one that goes above 25%. That's Q1. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that as Q1. And then I'm going to go down and find the one that's the first over 50%, and that's going to be Q2. And then continue going down to the first one over 75%, that's going to be Q3, and then Q4 is going to be the last one because it's the 100%. So these are our quartiles. Now, what we want to do is to calculate IQR, we want the middle 50%. So to get the middle 50%, we are going to take, I'm going to write this up at the top, IQR equals Q3 minus Q1. So we're taking the 75th percentile and we're subtracting the 25th percentile to give us the middle 50%. So in this case, we're going to have, for Q3, we have age 23. For Q1, we have age 20. So we're going to do 23. So we're going to have 23 minus 20 equals 3. So our IQR, or interquartile range, is 3 years. So the way that we would interpret this is we would say that the middle 50% of respondents range in age from 20 to 23. You could also say that the middle 50% of respondents are within 3 years of each other, or the interquartile range is 3 years, indicating that the distribution is not very widely spread out. So that's how you would interpret the range and interquartile range.